Well, good morning, everybody. I am so excited to be up here this morning, and I'm humbled about this opportunity to share communion with you all. So when I was kind of just thinking about what I wanted to share, I just kind of began to reflect on my own weekly communion times. And I know in the past couple of weeks we've kind of been grouping together, and that's been great, and I've really enjoyed that too. But I guess I was kind of just more reflecting on the weeks where we have our own time of thought and our own introspection. So I was thinking about that, and in those times I feel like I think about my sin. I think about my sin that I committed over the past week. I ask God for forgiveness for it, and that's great. And that's something that we all need to do in our relationship with God, and something that we all we need to do. And I realized that a lot of my time revolved around my sin and thinking about that. And so we need to do those things, but I hardly spent any time just thanking God, just thanking Jesus, thanking Him for, the sacrifice that Jesus made, praising Him, and revolving around that. And so I kind of felt that my communion time was just all about myself. It was kind of just all about my own sin, and never really focused on God. And I lacked praise. And so that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about this morning. But in order to be thankful, we have to know what we are thankful for and why we should be thankful for it. So with that, let's turn to Hebrews 9, and we're going to read verses 20 through 28. And here we see the writer of Hebrews explaining kind of the relationship between the Old and New Testaments and the part that Jesus plays in that. So Hebrews 9, starting in verse 20. He said, "This is the blood of the covenant, which God has commanded you to keep. In the same way, He sprinkled with the blood both the tabernacle and everything used in its ceremonies. In fact, the law requires that nearly everything be cleansed with blood, and without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. It was necessary then for the copies of the heavenly things to be purified with these sacrifices, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Christ did not enter a sanctuary made with human hands that was only a copy of the true one. He entered heaven itself, now to appear for us in God's presence. Nor did He enter heaven to offer Himself again and again, the way the high priest enters the most holy place every year with blood that is not his own. Otherwise Christ would have had to suffer many times since the creation of the world. But He has appeared once for all, at the culmination of the ages, to do away with sin, and by the sacrifice of Himself. Just as people are destined to die once, and after that to face judgment, so Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many, and He will appear a second time, not to bear sin, but to bring salvation to those who are waiting for Him." I mean, this is an incredible passage. It makes me just overwhelmed with gratitude every time I read it, and for the sacrifice that Jesus made. Just as the Old Covenant and the Old Testament required blood in order to be fulfilled, so did this new covenant that Jesus brought. We would not be able to have the relationship that we currently have with God if it wasn't for what Jesus did and the blood that He shed for us. He cleansed us from our sin, allowed us to have a relationship with God, and gave us salvation because He's willing to give up His own life for ours. But we all know this. We all know this in our heads. We know what Jesus did. We know why He did it, and we know what it means for us. But it is so easy to forget that. It is so easy to not be reminded of it. Amidst the busy lives we lead and the sin that we can get tangled up in, it can be easy to lose sight of the most amazing gift that we have ever received. And with that, we also forget to be thankful. We have never and will never receive anything more incredible than this. I think about my own new marriage. I think about graduation if you're in campus. I think about having a kid. I think about retirement. These things in our lives that we look forward to and anticipate and are so grateful for. So I want you guys just to kind of pause for a second and think about those things on that list. Think about how your joy and your thankfulness for those compare to your joy and thankfulness for what Jesus has done. I know I struggle with this. It's so much easier at times to be focused on the things right in front of me, the things that I'm looking forward to right here on this earth. But in reality, is that all of these things, these gifts, they pale in comparison to the gift that we have received from Christ. It requires us, this gift from God, it requires us to show gratitude because we will never be able to comprehend the magnitude of what Jesus has done. It is important, vital for our walks with God, to remember the sacrifice that Jesus made. So let's read one more passage at the end of Hebrews about why it is important to be thankful. So Hebrews 12, verse 28 through 29. It says, "Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful, and so worship God acceptably with reverence and with awe. For our God is a consuming fire." Our thankfulness leads us directly to worship. It causes us to have reverence and to have awe for our God and what he has done. And I know in my walk, I need more of that more reverence and awe, because it's so hard to just have our minds constantly on that. And so as we see here, our gratitude and our remembrance, it strengthens our relationship with God. So as we take our communion today, let's focus on the amazing sacrifice that Jesus made and be thankful.